Hey there, it's Adam here, and today I'm going to be talking about how Tim Winton uses the tool of the omniscient narrator and the way that he uses it to create not only magical realism, but also the way it's conveyed in the language and also the very fluid writing style that Winton applies to the novel. That it creates a sense of defamiliarization with the reader and ultimately has this profound effect and provides the reader with an understanding of the character's conscience in ways that we just can't really conveyed through dialogue or info dumping. It's a brilliant way that Tim Winton does it. So yeah, let's jump right in. So a brief background to the novel. It's about these two families that come together to live together in the same house between the years of 1943 and 1963 after they both experienced tragedies within their families. So on the one hand, we got the Pickles family with Sam as the father, Dolly as the mother, and Rose, Ted, and Chubb as the children. On the other hand, we have the Lamb family with Oriole as the mother, Lester as the father, Hat, Elaine, and Red as the children, and then there's also Fish and Quick, or Samson and Mason as their names respectively. But Fish is our omniscient narrator, and Quick is who we're going to be using to sort of explore these conventions just in his storyline specifically, just to get an idea of how effective it really can be to these characters' sort of situations and their emotional responses to these impacts in their lives. So, just a bit of context for the story for you. The Pickles tragedy comes in the form of Sam losing his hand in a boating accident, and his cousin dies, and effectively he ends up inheriting this house on Cloudstreet that's haunted by Aboriginal orphans, which is a whole nother sort of spiritual symbology in itself that we're not going to really get into. But Sam and the Pickles, they feel that the house is much too large for them and they feel very uncomfortable in it. So ultimately, Sam's decide as they need the money, they rent out one side of the house. So in come the Lambs. Their tragedy occurs when Fish, while the family is fishing, Quick and Lester accidentally catch Fish under the net, and he drowns. And in what they believe at the time to be a miracle, he comes back. But as we find out as the novel progresses, he doesn't come back the same. And so the theme of the novel is really about these notions of beliefs and challenging the characters' beliefs over such a long time period with life's ups and downs. And so the Pickles, they believe in the shifty shadow of luck, and they believe that luck and fortune are very fluid and it moves from person to person. And on the other hand, there's the Lambs, and they're this God-fearing family, often referred to as Bible bashers. And so a lot of the tragedy, a lot of the notions and the connotations of character arcs are based on these concepts and conflicts of the character's belief in relation to the tragedy that they experience in the family. So, although we later find out that it's Fish speaking to us in first person in the introduction chapter, as readers, we don't really experience the omniscient narrator as Fish come through until the moment of his drowning on page 29 in this interesting sort of passage that Fish will remember all his life and all his next life, remember this dark, cool plunge where sound and light and shape are gone, where something rushes him from afar, where open-mouthed, open-fisted he drinks in the river, whales it in with complete surprise. And it's really interesting in the way that it starts to be very transcendental with, all his life and all his next life. It's very different style of language as to what we've seen in the past 28 pages. And it progresses even to in page 32 when Lester's celebrating to everyone. We got him back. Quick heard his father bellow to the drinkers across the road. Back from the dead, Fish Lamb is back. Praise the Lord. And there's this very interesting line where, but Quick held his brother's head in his hands and knew it wasn't quite right because not all of Fish Lamb had come back. And it's this very interesting sort of perspective for us to experience as a reader because we don't really understand if it's Quick experiencing, if it's his train of thought as he experiences this tragedy, or if it's actually the omniscient narrator coming through and telling us that it's not quite right because Fish Lamb had not come back, or not all of Fish Lamb had come back. And it progresses even more with passages on page 69. It's like Fish is stuck somewhere. Not the way all living is stuck in time and space. He's in another stuckness altogether. Like he's half in and half out. You can only imagine and still fail to grab at how it must be. Even the dead fail to know, and that's what hurts the most. You have to make it up and have faith for that imagining. So that second person style of speaking to us as the reader is very interesting in itself, in the fact that compared to the very fluid and rhythmic sort of writing style that Tim Winton portrays through it or conveys throughout this whole novel, it's almost like the omniscient narrator is taking us out, detracting us from these passages and saying, this is some vital piece of information that you need to know. And it also, this passage here is very important. And not the way all the living are stuck in time and space is in another stuckness altogether. It really starts to indicate the notion of the spirit world and the real world, and how the connection between them that we're going to see later on in the slides, and how important it is for the readers to understand the conscious state of mind for the characters. And it really has this profound effect as the omniscient narrator, especially through scenes when he's speaking to himself in first person, and normally they happen before or after or in the moment of a big character realization of a certain aspect about themselves. But for Fish, he's speaking to himself in this passage. What can you tell him, Fish, right now while you're down there on that side of the wall with your strange brain and your black white eyes? What do you understand enough to say? You stand there in the morning and the afternoon and see quick or closed, white and hard. And it's this very sort of powerful way that the first person omniscient narrator of the spirit world, Fish, sort of not only gives us indications of quick, and it's very, very factual because he has this godlike wisdom and he's saying, why won't he look at you? It's a very profound moment in the characters that they sort of don't understand themselves or each other. And it's this very interesting way to show that the characters are struggling with their own sorts of reactions to the tragedy. And I'd just like to expand upon how, as I said, the first person writing has this very profound impact on the character's emotional state of being. It gives us this insight that dialogue wouldn't be able to emulate. And it's very powerful in the way that it comes through in between moments of magical realism that we're about to get into. But it's these passages or these chapters such as, I can feel it, even this side of the mirror, that's how intense it is. So strong I can sense it this far away, as far as light from a lamp, as time from a clock, quicks calling out like a wounded bird, seeing. And it continues on with Fish crying, and the boy goes on, teeth clenched, limbs hard as plaster, sending out his note until Lester fears he might smother him with a pillow to keep himself sane. And that cry goes on through walls and walls, shadows shake and quail, open-mouthed on the ceiling, and the unhappy dead caught like wallpaper and groaning silently at the sound of knowing. It wakes the living and shakes even the happy dead. Even now it makes me shiver. And it's those moments, even now it makes me shiver, it really conveys to the reader that these are some powerful conflicts of emotion that the characters are experiencing. And in this case is quick, and the sense of loneliness that he's ultimately feeling just from abandoning his brother as he's run away from home in this chapter. Magical realism ultimately stems from the omniscient narrator of Fish Lamb, and as such, we really see them evolve and bounce off each other as the novel progresses, and the magical realism really allows us some insights into the characters' subconscious and what's going on within their heads. So there's this beautiful chapter on page 61 where Quick finds a pile of newspapers and magazines someone's tied up and throws over the fence. Now and then he opens a paper and sees a blinded prisoner of war or a crying baby or some poor fleeing refugee running with a mattress across his back. And he'll tear it out with care, take it up to his private room and pin it to the flaky wall to remind himself that he is still alive, he is lucky, and he is still healthy, and his brother is not. And that leads into this beautiful passage of, but every night those cripples, the refugees, the starving, weeping wounded on his walls wait till Quick is asleep, and then they dance in their ragged borders, buckle paper and sag on their pins as they throw themselves into this weird, joyous tumult over his head. They never make a sound and he's always asleep through, but it happens all the same. Men throw off their mattresses and soldiers tear away bandages, and the dead rise out of the ground, inheriting the lonely quiet of their room until near morning, when they're exhausted by happiness and freedom, and they resume their places for the dawn, so that Quick Lamb might trap them again with his sorrow. And so the magical realism in this scene really indicate the guilt that Quick Lamb's feeling and the entropy that's going on of emotion within the subconscious of his brain. And it's really interesting to note that the wording that Tim Winton uses, such as inheriting the lonely quiet of the room, is sort of suggesting that Quicklam is attracting these spirit beings that we're seeing through the eyes of the omniscient narrator, because he is so anguished and sad, and he's sort of attracting them. And it's even expanded upon as it continues, and they resume their places for the dawn, so that Quicklam might trap them again with his sorrow. So it's really sort of conveying that Quick's bringing this guilt upon himself, just in ways that dialogue couldn't. And from that, it's very interesting and as well as important to note the foregrounding that occurs within these moments of magical realism, such as he takes it up to his private room to pin it to the flaky wall to remind himself that he is alive, he is lucky, he is still healthy, and his brother is not. And that sort of passage of lines, himself that he's lucky, he's still alive, and his brother is not, they're very sudden and very impactful compared to the rhythmic sort of writing that we see throughout most of the novel. And it really conveys that guilt on such another level and gives another dimension to the character of Quicklam. And that's even continued upon with the line, "Fair dinkum, Quicklam hates himself." And we see as readers, we can't really understand if it's the thought process of Quicklam, or again, if it's the omniscient narrator of Fishlam coming to the reader and saying factually that Quicklam really does hate himself at this moment of time within the 20-year time frame of Cloudstreet. And so the omniscient narrator and the magical realism that occurs throughout the novel, they really enmesh the real world and the spirit world together to give us this profound sense of wisdom from the godlike sort of perspective and from the omniscient narrator. And it's very epistemological in terms of the magical realism, that we can only see it and trust it through this being that's on the other side of the void. And so it almost becomes factual and very, very insightful, but in that it allows the writing style and Tim Winton to explore free and direct discourse, and also causing the reader to feel closer to the character's thinking process. Even just in times of normal, day-to-day lives of the characters, we still get that insight as to what they're thinking to certain situations, even though it's giving it to us or provided to us in a very reported structure. It still has that transcendental wisdom of the omniscient narrator. So let's just have a look at the dialogue. So the omniscient narrator still has this profound presence, even in times of dialogue where we can't really tell if it's free direct thought or if it's the omniscient narrator speaking through to us. Just for example, in this passage, "You did once, you took me one time, remember, we goed in the stars. Quick snapped an end off and put the net down. We were kids fish, we were asleep, it was a dream. And we were hungry, remember. Strange, but he'd forgotten about that night. There were so many things he just didn't think about. We saw, nah. And Quick knew he was lying. God Almighty, the things he decided not to remember, not to wonder about. Was it a family thing, this refusal to wonder?" And see, we really get that we don't still understand if it's Quick thinking these things, he'd forgotten about that night, there were so many things he just didn't think about, or if it's the narrator coming through to us and explaining factually that Quick really did know he was lying, and God Almighty, the things that he decided not to remember. It's almost like a comment that God Almighty, the things he decided not to remember. And it creates this profound sense of a godlike wisdom to the insights of the characters. We can just see through so transparently what they're going through and what's going on with their minds and their relationships between their characters, and how they deal with emotional conflicts within themselves, and in contrast to the beliefs that they have. So it's a very effective technique to show these emotions and whatnot through the time frame, such a wide time frame of 20 years. It just can't really be emulated in any other way or as and so looking at how I've applied it to my own body of work, there's this line and many lines like it within Tim Winton's Cloudstreet. Winter bored on and he lived an ordinary life in his slow, methodical way. He washed every day, cleaned once a week, and managed to see his awkward working hours out by thinking through the importance of every task. You could see it in the way he unlatched the tailgate, his pigs pressed against it, squealing, how he took his time at the weighbridge, And in my exercise 6, a flat cap hid empty eyes, but nonetheless the grey man danced a jagged hand over the deeply loaded leaves, carrying a step ladder and rope in the other. On top of the hill behind, the people on the deck of the winery would have thought it to be an elderly landscaper perhaps, sporting a frayed flannel a size too big and slacks too short. A closer look and you'd even know this ragged figure was younger, maybe not even middle-aged, but you can look at a person and know that life had aged them too quickly. So in this sense, I was really trying to, and in this exercise, emulate the astronomy just by distancing the character from other people within the setting of the story, and also by applying that second person speaking to the reader directly and just giving them that information right off the bat and detracting them from the story to give them this vital and concrete piece of information. And you can see conventions or aspects of the conventions of Tim Winton that he applies in Cloudstreet show in my exercise 8 entry. As in, Jared noticed Tony was giving a styrofoam cup of me an Indian burn. He looked around and saw people drifting down the hallways of the community center. Limbo this place was, a pit stop between the real world and the world of the addicted. And you can see that sort of connection between the real world and the real world of the addicted, and how it's that magical realism coming through just to show and defamiliarize the reader and show them that it really is the way that this character just subconsciously perceives the world around him, and in this case Jared with the community center. And it's that sort of powerful sort of astronomy that I'm trying to emulate, that Tim Winton just so beautifully applies in Cloudstreet throughout the. And so the lessons that I've learned from Tim Winton as the omniscient narrator is that he gives the writer a certain freedom to explore the characters from this other sort of realm of perspective, and it really allows the writer to explore the characters in this new emotional depth. And so when it's combined with magical realism, it creates this surreal astronomy in the fact that we see the characters in all their entropy, all their raw human thoughts and emotions, and together they really provide an impact to the character realizations, especially when character realizing certain aspects upon themselves. And it really creates this fundamental dimension and human touch to the characters that I haven't seen in a book ever before, and I don't expect to see in a book anytime soon. It's just so unique to Tim Winton as a writing style, and especially the use of this spirit world omniscient narrator. It's just a beautiful way to convey these emotions of a wide cast of characters in such a wide time setting, but to be so profound in the emotional impact that it conveys upon the reader. So yeah, and that's it. So thank you very much.